Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to our Scrutiny Committee meeting. I understand that for your information that the meeting will be live streamed and also recorded, and all who can tap into our meeting are most welcome. To carry on the meeting, any apologies? The only apology that I'm aware of is from Councillor Goldie. Under 2 declarations of interest, anyone wishes to mention any item under this heading, this is their opportunity. Failing which, we go on to the minute of our previous meeting of 1st April. It has been circulated. Does anyone wish to raise any item under this minute, which once again I've got to commend as being a very helpful lengthy minute, which makes it very helpful to remember the events back in April. Anyone wish to make any comments? If not, can I have your approval?
Agreed.
Thank you. Go straight on to the rolling action log. The items on this are actually within the main item within this is actually on the agenda for today, the scrutiny plan for 2020. Yes.
Could I ask you about the progress report on someone in primary school? I think a report still to be submitted.
I understand. I understand that in actual fact that this can't be completed due to the delay in the actual meetings being taken place due to COVID. I don't think in actual fact the report has actually been completed yet, and therefore we can't take this further. I'm afraid we're going to keep on. This will be brought to our attention, and it will always be a pending item, but at the moment we can't, I understand, progress this further. Is Robert with us? No.
That's fine, you know.
Sorry, Jim, I can't tell you more, but except that I understand that due to COVID, the actual report has not actually been submitted yet, and therefore it will be a bit delayed before it gets to the Scrutiny Committee.
COVID's got a lot to answer for, eh?
Well, as we will recount as the proceedings go on today, we got on to agenda item 5, the corporate plan, and Stuart, are you taking this?
Yes, thank you, Convener. Good morning to members on the call. This is first of 2 reports members will consider this morning, looking back over the course of the last 8 months or so. This report looks at progress on delivering against our corporate plan priorities. Item 7 on today's agenda will provide an update on the Council's response to COVID along with partners. These 2 reports are complementary and provide members with a reminder of how the Council has focused its resources alongside partners during what has been an unprecedented period of time. So turning to the report before you just now in the corporate plan, members will be aware that over the last 8 months or so, individual reports have been brought to Scrutiny Committee for your consideration against the 3 priorities in our corporate plan. So Kenny brought a report on communities, Pete Reid brought a report on enterprise, and at the last meeting, Karen brought a report on innovation. We also reported to members at Scrutiny Committee recently the latest local government benchmarking framework indicators and how they formed part of our corporate plan monitoring process. So this report before you this morning pulls together all of the work that we've been doing to deliver on our corporate plan priorities. It also provides members with an oversight of our performance and continuing work to improve our performance management framework. So in the report itself, we start at section 3.1 with some high-level takeaway points from the last 8 months or so. This is far from an exhaustive list, but across the 3 priorities, we think that the emerging themes have been that communities want to do more for themselves and be more involved in local decision making about their communities. The digital dial has moved significantly over the course of the last 8 to 12 months for pupils, for teachers, for members, for officers, and for our communities. And supporting local businesses through the pandemic and leading the economic recovery of our area has gained increased importance. The report follows a structure where it looks at our corporate plan actions, our Council of the Future priority projects, the local government benchmarking framework indicators by corporate plan priority, and then we provide a short narrative on each of the corporate plan priorities. Then we finish off with some performance information and reporting. Supplementing today's report are a number of case studies that set out some of the key initiatives that we've been involved in over the course of the past months. And every member on this call will have their own individual case study that they'll be aware of what's happened in their communities. Appendix 2 of the report provides a rank status of each of the actions in our corporate plan, and these link back to the actions that were in our corporate plan when it was agreed by Council in September of last year. So a summary of the progress in delivering these corporate plan actions is shown in the table in section 4.1 of the report. Appendix 3 looks at where our Council of the Future projects sit in relation to our priorities. And again, we'll put a table into the body of the report at section 4.2 just to summarise where these projects sit. The local government benchmarking indicators mapped to our corporate plan priorities are shown in Appendix 4 and summarised in the table at 4.3. And as mentioned previously, members recently considered a report on all of our local government benchmarking indicators. Paragraphs 4.5 to 4.10 look at what the key deliveries have been under each of our corporate plan priorities. So these include the community conversations that we've had over the course of the last 8 months, the development of the economic recovery and town centre regeneration plans, introduction of digital telecare, and the rollout of digital learning, and the work that we've done to try and improve digital inclusion. The final part of the report covers local performance indicators and performance reporting. We mentioned that local indicators are collected and reported to each of our service management teams, and of course these are all available to members through the member portal in Pintana and real-time information available to members. A number of these local indicators are also reported as part of our regulatory requirements. Finally, convener, when the corporate plan indicators were reported to the executive last year, we said we would develop a number of local customer satisfaction indicators, And in February of this year, we undertook a survey using the People's Panel, and the outcomes are shown in section 413 of the report and provide us with a benchmark for further surveys covering off the areas indicated in the survey results. Convener, a lot has happened over the course of the last 8 months or so. A lot is happening and a lot needs to continue to happen. So what you have in front of you is a snapshot in time, and we'll continue to report to committee on each of our corporate plan priorities, and just working in rotation. Next corporate plan priority to come before you will be communities, and that will come after the recess. So, convener, a very short overview of an extremely long report, but full of good work that the council and its partners have been doing. The recommendations, convener, are set out for members to consider, and I'm happy to answer any questions that members have along with colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. As you say, it's a lengthy document, but full of great information. I throw it open to questions. Yes, David.
Thanks, convener. Page 24, the bottom of page 24, the customer perception indicators. Some of these figures are quite low. I just wondered where the people were from, if it was a good sort of wide area geographically, and how many. It says 17%, but it doesn't give you actual numbers of people. So that would be useful to get some information on that, just for my first question.
Stuart, can you pick that up?
Yeah, thanks, convener. We've got about 1,000 people on our People's Panel, so you can draw the numbers, from that. We're looking to build the numbers that are on our People's Panel, but roughly we've got about 1,000 people there at the moment, and we look to advertise and encourage people to join the panel just through a number of different ways: social media, kind of correspondence that we're sending out, and we're going to make attempts, as I mentioned, to try and grow that number. But we're about 1,000 at the moment.
Okay, and what kind of locations are they from, did you say?
It's a fairly widespread across the council area, so I don't think there's any area where we don't have any representation. But again, as we get into our further community conversations, it's the type of thing that we can try and promote through these local discussions.
Okay, right. So it says here there's about 1,000 people on that, say, a rate of 17%. Is that the kind of norm for people taking part in the discussions there? Is it the same people that are always on that? Is it worth changing these people every so often if we're only getting a 17% return?
Yeah, these are good questions. So if I reference, for example, the response rate that we get to the rent consultation that we do on an annual basis, we get about 16-17% response rate back on that. That doesn't mean to say it's the same people who respond. I think I'm just saying that about kind of 15, 16, 17% or thereby is kind of typical of the response rate that we get to this type of survey. If you have a survey on something that is of particular importance to a local community, then you'll get a higher response rate on that. But I guess if you're asking more general questions, as we're doing in this type of survey, then I think that's the type of response rate that you get back.
Okay, so are the people changed on that panel, or is it just the same people all the time?
So we're just building the panel just now, and obviously at 17%, not everybody is responding to that. So, you know, I think that we're in the kind of foothills of people's panel. So how we go about building it, changing it, you know, is some steps further down the road, you know, for us. But I accept the point that you're making, that you need to refresh the panel so you get fresh ideas and you're not just asking the same people, you know, all the time.
Yeah, I mean, you would think if people want to be on a panel, they would be quite interested in responding. So, I mean, how are these people selected? Do they apply to be on that panel, or do you just pick them at random? Is it maybe something you could put out to the whole community, asking for people to be on the panel that might be interested in making responses?
Yeah, so all the people who are on the panel have volunteered to be on the panel, and it's just been built up through a variety of means, whether it's been, for example, people who have responded to the budget consultation that we do. We ask them if they'd be interested in joining our people's panel, so they would join the people's panel in that way. The rent consultation I mentioned as well. So, you know, by and large, it's other consultation mechanisms that we are using to try and build the people's panel so far. But as I mentioned earlier, the community conversations that we're having gives us a chance to promote the opportunity for people to take part in the people's panel. But again, I suppose going back to the point that you made, if you've got 1,000 people who have said that they want to be on a panel, getting a 17% response, you know, that you'd have thought if you wanted to be on the panel, you would want to express your views, but you know, we can't make people express their views.
No, but I mean, if there's been a few things that have been asked and people are just consistently not getting back to you, it may be worth putting different people on the panel. That's maybe something you can look into.
Sure. I mean, there's certainly, certainly, I mean, there's no limit on the number of people that we're going to have on the panel. So it's not as if, you know, these 1,000 people are blocking anyone else from joining. So I think, as I've said a couple of times, you know, our ambition is to grow that number, and hopefully if we grow that number, then we can get people who are more keen to express their views.
Okay. All right, thanks. I've got just a couple other questions. Page 35, employability. Where am I now? The young person's guaranteeing kickstart. I just wondered if we can get a wee bit more info on that and how many young people that involves, or have had kind of positive outcome from that.
I can come in on that, Chair. That's okay. And I would need to get the information that this is very much a moving picture just now. The Kickstart scheme is just being established in the Youth Guarantee programme. So our employment training unit are getting that up and running. And I can certainly get some information on the number of places that are being provided.
Yeah, that would be helpful. Thanks. Right, just one other quick question. Page 38. SHSN 5% of council houses are energy efficient. How do you quantify when a house is efficient? And how can that be improved?
Okay. Kenny Gillespie, could you answer that one, you think?
Sorry, Kenny.
Happy to do so, convener. Councillor, it can be it's quantified through many ways in regards to the type of heating, the property build, what additional climate measures we've put in place through things like loft insulation, wall cavity, and obviously the heating system. So we look at that every year and we look at how we improve that, and it's done through quite a unique set of properties that are put together. And what happens, a figure comes out to see if we meet the standard or not. As you're aware, we're looking to meet the higher standard, which is the new EASH standard. So that's why we review all the properties every year, and it's held within a database. So if we change the heating system, that has a positive impact there. Windows, doors, things like that, and that all ties back into the Housing's Capital Programme.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay, thanks, Convener.
Thank you, David. I note Councillor David Grant was wanting to come in, and also Councillor Spears. David, first, please.
Thank you, Convener. First of all, there's a lot of good work in this paper, and I'd like to congratulate us for getting a gold level 1 Digital Telecare Information Award. So well done on that. This might be another figure one for Mr. Ritchie. And on page 20, the community conversations through the wards. Stuart, have you any idea the figures of the people that was on them? Because on my ward, there was a lot of complaints that they weren't alerted of these conversations taking place. Was that a figure over the other wards, or was it just mine? Because there was a lot of complaints that they didn't know these conversations were happening. So do you have figures for over the wards, please?
Thanks, Convener. I think Kenny might have the numbers of participants in these conversations.
Convener, I do have the numbers. I don't have them now, but I'm happy to provide them to the local member of this of who attended.
David, is that?
Yeah, that's fine, Kenny. Thanks for that. Could I ask one more, Convener, if that's okay?
Yes.
It might be Mr. Gillespie again. On page 38, SECON 1, non-employment people assisted into work from council-operated funded employability programmes. There's been a drastic decline in this one from 17-18, where Falkirk was 22%, 18-19 we were 24%, and then 2019 to 20 we dropped away down to 14%. Do we have an explanation for that, or are we on top of it? Have we noted it?
I'll bring her, Robert, but I'll tell Lorna that she's next to the list.
Through you, Chair, that's one for our service, for development services. It's the programmes that we support through the Employment and Training Unit. And the reason for the reduction has been the reduced number of placements offered by employers. So there's a number of, we rely on employers offering placements to trainees to offer them access to employment. And there has been a reduction there. Clearly, this has been a factor in some parts affected by COVID, although the timescale for this one predates that, but it has been adding to that uncertainty. And the programmes that employment and training units are offering are reshaping substantially as a consequence of COVID. The reference earlier to the Kickstart scheme and Youth Guarantee scheme being taken on board. And so that's starting to pick back up again in terms of the placements that are on offer from employers. So it is certainly something that our ETU work with very closely, and they report into the council and to Scottish Government, who are amongst the main funders of their programmes.
Thank you, Mr. Duff.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Spears, Robert, and Lorna, I notice you've been trying to get my attention. I'll come to you next.
Okay, thank you, Convener. It's also got regarding page 24, the customer participation indicator, perception indicators. Got a few questions on that, since we appear to be struggling to get above 50% on any of them, and as low as 27% on does Falkirk Council provide good value for money. First question is this geographically spread, and does it represent the size of each area geographically on Falkirk area, district, council?
I'll come back on that, Convener. It's just a combined number. It's not broken down by any geographic area, so it's just an all-in pooled number.
Is this done digitally?
It is all done digitally, yes.
Well, representing an area of multiple social deprivation and child deprivation, not everybody is digitally provided in the area, so we're only really getting a representation of people, one, that maybe live in central Falkirk or whatever the geographical spread is. But if you've got trouble with broadband and can't afford to pay it, then you're only going to be represented digitally on this survey, are you?
I mean, I think it's worthwhile, making the point that this is not the only way in which we gather information about customer satisfaction. So I mentioned earlier, for example, the consultation that we do on rents, and we ask our tenants if, in their view, rents are value for money. Is the council a good landlord, and that type, question. So we've got an ability to, and that goes to all of our tenants, and that's delivered through surface mail. So we've got a number of ways in which we can build up a picture of what our citizens think about the council. Another one's through the budget consultation that we do. We did a number of meetings in developing the corporate plan last year's with community groups of interest. So there's probably a number of ways in which we build up a picture of what our citizens think about the council and its services.
Kind of double-barreled question here. Do you think we're getting our message across? I think, personally, the council does a lot of things, and they do a lot of things really well. But are we getting that message across to people? Because the perception here is quite low.
I mean, I think you make a really good point, Councillor Spears. So, if you look at what's included in this report, what's included in the report in item 7 on today's agenda, and just the terrific work that's been done in the last 8 months. But then there's just the day-to-day things that happen with the council and its communities as well. So yeah, we probably do need to try harder to get our message across over the services that we provide and the quality of the services that we provide. You look at the information that's in the local government benchmarking framework, and we've got many of our indicators are in the top quartile, not many in the lowest quartile. So perhaps we just need to find different avenues of getting the message out over the quality of the services that the council provides, but that's accepting that we don't get it right every time.
Well, if you do comparators and benchmarking with some other councils, especially in England, the level of service and the amount of services that we provide is enormous compared to them. And people, through perception, feel they're not getting good value for money, where in fact they are getting more for their money than most other areas. So maybe if we've done comparators, benchmark comparators with other areas, to let the people hear know exactly the level of service they're getting compared to other places. You know, if you lived in this place in Wiltshire or something else, you know, you need to pay for a brown bin, you need to pay for this, you need to pay for that. I think we should be flying our flag a bit higher and letting people know the amount of services they actually get compared to other places.
I take it that's a comment, not a question. So,
well, it's both. I said at the start, it's double-barreled because to move forward, people need to know where they're moving forward from.
can you provide an answer, Stuart?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I think that we try to provide, you know, a benchmark where we can. So, you know, again, I'll go back to the rent consultation that we do, and as part of the rent consultation, you know, we set out where we are in terms of the other 25 local authority landlords in Scotland. So where are we in terms of our spending on repairs, maintenance and investment? Where are we in terms of spending and supervision and management? And where are we in rent levels compared to the rest of Scotland? And we fare well in all of these categories, but yet we still get a significant number of tenants coming back saying that they don't think that rents are value for money. So again, it's back to when you mentioned, Councillor Spears, perception quite a lot. So, you know, we can provide the facts to our customers and citizens, but it's their perception. It's their perception.
Well, maybe we should. I'm not saying boast more, but get the message out more exactly what we're doing and the levels that we're working at, because people will moan, and there's always something to gripe about rather than praise. But it becomes endemic unless we're counteracting it.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree, and I think that we try hard as an organisation to tell the good stories of what it is that we are doing and have done. But there's always room for improvement, on that, and we've all got a role to play in that, officers and elected members. I think one of the things that the community conversations is allowing us to do is to have that face-to-face discussion with our communities so that we can explain more about the things that we are doing and have been doing. And I think that that is giving a greater understanding to our communities. So there's a lesson for us arising from these community conversations over the knowledge that our communities have over the work that we do. So the lessons learned, one for us to pick up.
Thank you. Lorna, I apologise for keeping you so long, but and I note that Councillor Blackwood wants to speak, so I'll come to you next, Jim.
Right. Okay, thank you. I just want to thank you very much for this report. There's
yes.
a lot of detail in it, as it takes quite a wee bit of reading. However, I'm going to go back to community conversations, and I know you said that you're going to go into this more because the report we've got is there's a wee bit conflicting information. The update in communities' priorities talking about 20 community groups, and then the achievement is talking about 8 community conversations were held, attended by 100 people, but we're going to get that information, I'm sure. And I would like to differentiate between groups and individuals who had these community conversations, But my question around it is a matter of fact, is regarding the community conversation, is what was the mechanism to ensure that all voices were heard to reflect the equality, diversity, inclusion of the Falkirk Council residents, for example, to giving our Polish communities? And can you tell me how that was demonstrated and how that was measured? Is that possible?
I'm happy to try and answer that, convener, if that's okay. So, very much, Councillor, one of the things that we're very well aware of when going to do the good conversations is what we call the hard to reach, and very much the issue about hard to reach. Were they hard to reach, or just did we not try hard enough to reach some of our minority groups as well? So we used our third sector to do that. We used CVS, we used also groups that we learnt from and connected with through the pandemic, through the COVID-19 pandemic. The difficulty being, as it was highlighted earlier on for a different question, is because of the pandemic, most of the connections we're making were through IT, through Wi-Fi, through digital, rather than face-to-face. What we would want to do more of going forward, which we will connect more of the groups, is doing more of the face-to-face, more of the looking at our local hubs and local communities face-to-face to do more interaction. So I can certainly show you the different, or provide a list of the different areas that we did connect with. But again, it very much comes back to that we said earlier by Mr. Richards, is how much people wanted to interact as well. We're at the early stages of these good conversations. We are tackling things in a different way. So we are certainly going out there and selling a very positive message, but a very positive message under hard circumstances because of the pandemic. And again, at the same time, our citizens have been out doing a lot of good work elsewhere and are a wee bit fatigued as well, and we have been getting that fed back as well when getting some information, vital information. But certainly that's how we've been tackling it, using our third sector through CVS, RVS, through our minority groups as well. So we've definitely been trying our best to get to these groups, Councillor.
I appreciate that, Kenny. The thing is about that with a lot of minority groups as well. Sometimes language can be a barrier. So is that something you may want to introduce in future if you're going to have face-to-face conversations? Use the third sector, people that experience and speaking a different language, so you can actually address them and engage with them, and hopefully you can all. Is that possible?
Convener, yeah, that has been used a couple of times to individuals who require that, and we've brought interpreters in as well when required, Councillor.
Stuart, do you wish to come in on that one?
Yeah, thanks, Convener. I just wanted to go back to the point that Councillor Binney made around a reference in the report to 8 conversations, and then a further reference later on in the report to 20 conversations. And just to explain these two numbers, the 8 conversations were held in the autumn of last year as part of our consultation on our priorities for our new corporate plan. And that's where the 8 conversations had about 100 people in it, and the product of these conversations was considered by members at council when the corporate plan was considered in September last year. The reference later in the report to the 20 community conversations is the conversations that Kenny has just spoken about, which are around the development of the new Falkirk plan, our new community plan. So the council corporate plan, looking at a timescale of 2-3 years. Our community plan, our Falkirk plan, looking at somewhere in the region of 10+ years in timescale. So hopefully that explains the reference to 8 conversations and 20 conversations.
Thank you, it does. I have another question. Is it okay if I ask that now?
Yes, on you go.
It's on page 21, and it's I myself, I'm sure we all are delighted that Falkirk Council has become the first local authority in Scotland to go live with an end-to-end digital telecare service. I was delighted to play a small part in the pilot. However, my question is this data now being collected to establish more positive outcomes for the service and the people of Falkirk? And will this service be shared to other councils? And will Falkirk Council benefit from this? Because we're now in the stage of actually trying to bring resources into our council now. Actually, if we've been innovative with this service, so there must be something that'll be good, that'll come out for everybody concerned.
Stuart, can you
Yeah,
respond?
I'm happy to answer that, Convener. I don't know whether either Martin or Patricia might want to pick that up, but if they don't want to pick it up, I'm happy to run with it.
I'm happy to come in, Stuart, if that would be helpful.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yep. So we're working closely corporately with the council and the partnership to develop and define what offer we could make to other local authorities. We have had approaches from a couple of local authorities who are very interested in what we're doing, but Gillian Thompson, our Chief Finance Officer, is leading work with Stuart and Karen's team to really define what we could offer as a basis for those discussions. So you're correct, Councillor, in identifying that is a possibility for us to provide that service, and we're exploring that. Thank you.
Thank you, that's excellent, thank you.
Thank you. Right, Jim Blackwood.
Thanks, Convener. Just a couple of questions. 3.1, you've made it says community made it clear they want to do more for themselves. I'm going back and touch on the community conversations, because in our ward, Denny, Banknock, it was a disaster. The Denny and Delin Head one community conversation, I think 2 residents and a dog turned up, and the Banknock one, the dog didn't even turn up, so we had to cancel it. So there's obviously a lot of work ahead to try. I mean, we're saying in one sense that the communities want to do more for themselves, but we're not turning up at community conversations. So how do we get them to do more for themselves? We can't communicate with them.
Yes, Kenny, to you.
Nina, for yourself. No, you're absolutely right, Councillor. And I think it's back to some of the points that I was saying earlier. The communities have been out supporting each other through the pandemic, and there is an issue of fatigue as well, as I said earlier. I think the things that have to go forward about communities want to do more and to help is very much through building up of trust and transparency, and I've mentioned that in various other reports. It's also about transparency and clarity about their role within the community and the impact and difference that they can make, and that's certainly coming through different priorities that I have through our community choices and other community enterprise projects that are going at the present time. We have had other forums where we have had a lot more interest in coming, and it's something that we've taken away and to try and look at doing things better. I did mention earlier that it's always been digital because of the pandemic. We see more interaction face to face when we can do some events and some have different aspects of that event, which would encourage other individuals, including adults, children, and their dogs. And if they want to bring in other animals, I'm happy to take them as well, Councillor, going forward. But as I said before, we have had difficult circumstances when we've launched these things, but we are confident that we are making strides in to get different people and different opinions to help us shape the way forward and our future Falkirk plan.
Could I maybe just add, Convener? Yeah, you're right, but people don't wait when there's a crisis in communities. People don't wait for support from councils or anybody else. They buckle down and do something, and that's what's been harmed. I mean, the food banks in areas were set up by locals because they saw a crisis, and and we should maybe learn from that and take on board. But other questions is about it's not the booklet on combating learning loss and food poverty. The Falkirk High School summer takeaway, it seems to have been quite a success. And obviously I'm going to ask the question, will it continue? And is there any way or looking at rolling out to other schools?
Who's that? Robert? Robert, you?
I think that's
Oh, yes.
something that would be under consideration, Councillor, but I can't confirm that it's going to be rolled out just at this time, but we'll be looking at the feedback from the first school and take a view on that in the coming period.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
Thank
me,
you.
convener, I think, at the moment. Anything else was going to ask me an answer?
Alison, you've been waiting for a while. I'm sorry.
Thanks. I've got a few questions. It was just quite a lot of members have expressed concern about the survey on page 24, and I would be the same. And I'm just wondering, is the scores so low, the percentages so low because of the pandemic, or was that from before the pandemic that the survey results came? Because it is shockingly low, and I don't think we've ever had scores like that before.
I'll pick that up, convener. So this is the first time that we've gone out as a council and asked these questions. So this is our benchmark, and we'll ask the same questions going forward, and let's see what happens with the numbers, and hopefully they'll go up. And yeah, perhaps the pandemic does have an influence on the numbers that are there. I mean, it's maybe worthwhile making the point that if you look at the customer satisfaction indicators that appear for the local government benchmarking framework, all of our customer satisfaction indicators are in the bottom quartiles. Now, I think because of the sensitivity around some of these numbers, you can get a cluster around a certain number that can push you, a point of a percentage can push you between, one quartile and another. But historically, we've always been low for customer satisfaction on things like refuse collection, things like street cleaning, things like museums, leisure facilities. So customer satisfaction typically hasn't been great, and I don't think anybody on this call would disagree, doesn't mirror the quality of the services that we provide.
Mm-hmm.
I think that obviously we offer lots of really high quality services, education, social work, etc. But people don't equate that with what they see around about them in terms of, as you say, litter, etc., and like the state of the roads. And I think that we've got to accept that those are the priorities for a lot of people, and we're not meeting their expectations. I was going to talk about page 29. CP CHS 20 Cornwall 8 about, it says ensure people feel safe within their community and live in high quality housing, and there is absolutely fantastic work ongoing in terms of bringing houses up to a better standard, rough casting, re-roofing, etc. But at the end of the day, we have to accept, and we all know, that a high percentage of our stock is no high quality. It's never going to be high quality, and it doesn't meet people's expectations. And obviously we're working on a master plan for Grangeworth just now, but that is the reality. Our stock, a lot of our stock, I'd say probably the majority of our stock isn't high quality. We're doing the best with it that we can, but going forward, when people have got different expectations now about where they want to stay and what type of accommodation they want to live in, and because of the fact that a lot of our housing isn't high quality, that leads to people with problems maybe living in those houses because they're the only people that want to stay in them. So, and obviously that's been tackled in another forum, but it's just, it is a significant issue. And also people feeling safe in their communities. A lot of people don't feel safe in their communities. just now. A lot of people don't feel safe in Grangemouth for lots of different reasons. Again, with neighbourhood issues, antisocial behaviour, and that has been increasing, in over the last year or so. So they are real issues, and we've got a long way to go before we stop tackling them. Just two short questions from
I think before you go any further, could Kenny Bless, would you like to come in and to respond at all?
Yep, happy to try and respond. A couple of things with what the local member said. I would probably disagree in regards to quality homes. We have got really good quality homes, and that's then matched by the housing quality standard, which is a national recognition standard, and we are circa above 97% of all properties, and we were higher, but due to the pandemic, they were slightly dropped, I think, by 0.5 because we need to do certain electrical checks that because of restrictions we couldn't do. So we certainly have a really, really high standard, one of the highest throughout the region. However, what I would say is what the local member is saying, I would certainly agree with. There is different expectations now of our citizens and tenants, and what their expectations are going forward. And again, I think that's been again enhanced due to the pandemic. And as the local member said, we have the local housing strategy, and we have various programmes below that we're looking at master planning going forward in future years, and that's reflected in our housing investment programmes, and as I said, our local housing strategy and our housing needs demands.
Alison, over to you.
Thanks. It was just a couple of quick questions. It was regarding SECO 21 on SECON1 on page 38. Obviously, we've always had a really good record in getting people into back into employment, getting them into training programmes, and it's obviously disappointing that we've significantly dropped that figure, and that's pre-pandemic levels. Is there any way that we're ever going to get those figures back up? Because we were actually leading the way in Scotland for a long time.
Through you, Chair. Yes, we are. I mean, there's actually a lot of activity on participation. So we've got very high level of participation in programmes just now. The challenge is getting outcomes in terms of placements with employers and the availability of positions with them to place our trainees. So that's something that ETU are very active with at the present time, and taking advantage of the likes of the new programmes that have been announced with COVID, Councillor. So it is something we are very active on, and I've been in touch with the team just to get an update to follow up on some of the questions that were given earlier.
Just finally, Convener, just one last question. It was regarding CON6, and obviously compared with the rest of Scotland, every year we're significantly less, and almost half. If I'm getting the numbers right, because I'm not very good at arithmetic, we spend almost half the budget on economic development and tourism that other areas do. And when you think about the amount of importance to the national economy, about what we're doing, the work with TIF, the Engaged Investment Zone, we've got Helix, the Wheel, loads and loads of opportunities, and we've got a tiny team, and that tiny team does amazing work. But I just think that when you see those figures, it just shows you how much more we could do with a bigger team and a wee bit more money spent in that area. And every year at the budget, we keep thinking about putting that budget back further. And I just think we really need to value the work that we do value the work that they do, but we just need to look at those figures and think about what other parts of Scotland are investing, what other councils are investing in the same, you know, in ED, and we're not doing that.
Yeah. Thanks, Alison. Councillor Spears, Robert, do you want to come in? Oh, sorry, forgive me, I'm cutting here. Douglas, you were going to respond.
I can come back on that for Councillor Black, and certainly, you know, welcome the prospect of any additional resource that's possible for economic development. But we do recognise also the budget pressures that the council is dealing with, and importantly the pressure for economic recovery that's active just now. So additional funds were put in for economic recovery at the last budget meeting. And in fact, there was 300,000 put in for last financial year and 500,000 for this financial year and for the next year coming up. And that's to help with that economic recovery work. And so hopefully that will really make a difference. Obviously, we also do what we can to source external funding, and there's a range of new announcements that have come through with COVID that we're looking to tap into, and that will help to augment the capacity that we have in place.
Thank you. Robert, you're coming in.
Yeah, it's just to echo what Councillor Black says about our tourism section. For one of the smallest budgets, that probably brings more money into this district than anybody else. But last year, as we all know, has been extremely difficult, but we've spent our time being extremely proactive, especially with our videos and different stuff we'll put off. I believe, and I will spread this rumour widely, that we've got more hits than Venice. So at this time, we're trying to create the boxes that people want to tick when they're doing their staycation. But our parks, especially the Helix Calendar Park, Zetland Park, have been busier probably than they ever have been. So having been proactive in years gone by, we have the places that have wide open spaces where people feel safe and want to go. And yeah, there's always more money can be spent, but you know, in the times of desperate cuts, I think we're punching above our weight on it. And for quite a new venue in Scotland, our attractions are certainly causing a great deal of interest. And I think as the country begins to open up again post-pandemic, I think we're prepared for the bounce back bubble, you know, where people will want to come and visit here. And that will be good, not just for Falkirk, but for all local businesses, hotels, restaurants. As for leisure facilities, well, most of them have been closed, so it's difficult to have a success story during the pandemic with buildings where people want to congregate. But our buildings are, most of them are in relatively good condition. I know that especially our community halls, where our hall management committees have worked hard over the last few years on refurbishment. And our other sports centres, as they open up, I think they'll be used more widely now than they were before. So it looks as though we're in for a rosy future. And that's not just a hope or a prayer. That's because people are more used to going to places in their local vicinity just now. And we should be there and prepared to accept that and to move forward with it.
Thank you. Anyone else wishes to come in with a question? Perhaps I could myself come in and refer you to page 21. The issue regarding the upgrading school Wi-Fi in the Connected Falkirk project. Stuart, can you tell me what progress has been made, and will it be completed? Will the project be completed by the projected September date?
Yeah, thanks, convener. So the delays are down to COVID restrictions and only essential contractors being allowed in to do work for that period of time, quite a significant period of time. So now that non-essential repairs and improvements can be made, we'll be able to get back on board with getting Wi-Fi installed. It's probably a bit too early to say whether we will achieve the deadline of September or not, but that's something that we could come back and update members of committee in. We could probably just do it offline as the most efficient way, if members are happy to for that to happen.
Thank you, Stuart. One other point, if I may ask, at page 32, give me a second. Under communities shaping Falkirk's future, what's the cross-council community empowerment group? What is that group, and who's on it?
Convener, I'm happy to answer that.
Thank you.
The cross-council group brings together officers across the council that are involved in community engagement in one way or another. So that it's the Community Shaping Falkirk project that we have within the Council of the Future programme, so it has bearing on what we do. So we aim to have 2 officers from each of the Falkirk council divisions and 2 from the Health and Social Care Partnership on it. And we look to have some officers from the Trust going forward. We want to practice what we preach by learning from our colleagues and involving them in process as much as possible. So it's very much a lot of the questions that have been asked earlier, Convener, about how can we do better, and it ties up with the 4 pillars that we have as well. So it's very much learning from ourselves, learning from the communities, listening what's been fed back to us to make sure that we get better information that we could use more proactively going forward from our communities.
Thank you, Kenneth. Could I just say, following up questions which were on the the percentage of unemployed people being assisted into work, that I would hope that at a future report, a follow-up report could be actually provided to a future meeting to let us know what what it's doing to try to increase this percentage of unemployed people being assisted into work. Does anyone have any further questions on this item? Sorry, Councillor Blackwood, my apologies, I didn't see you, Joe.
Sorry, it's a question I missed, Convener. It's on page 19, corporate plan actions. Communities, there's one community in amber. Could I ask what community that is and our community project and why it's still in amber?
Stuart, can you respond?
I can, Convener, if you just let me get to the appropriate page in the appendix. Yeah, it's on page 29 of today's agenda, and it's about safeguarding our green spaces and maintaining a transport infrastructure that's sustainable and fit for purpose, and it's a development services action. So I wonder whether Douglas might be best placed just to say where we are with that project.
Thanks, Stuart. Yeah, I mean, this covers a number of activities that we've got underway on safeguarding green spaces. We've got actions underway to promote the biodiversity and manage our open spaces. There's been a report to Executive on that in January this year that I initiated a pilot exercise for that. And on transport infrastructure, we've got additional investment that was put into the roads network for capital expenditure to upgrade elements of the road infrastructure. Again, that was subject to a report to Executive before the tail end of last year and is being activated. There's also the Spaces for People programme that's underway to enable more active travel. And a number of measures that are being funded by the Scottish Government to encourage walking and cycling across the area. And we did make a submission to the Scottish Government's Bus Partnership Fund for financial support to introduce additional infrastructure measures to help promote the bus network. So quite a range of measures being promoted against that action.
Thanks, Convener.
Okay. Thank you. If there are no further questions to this, I refer to the recommendations. Recommended the committee notes the update of the corporate plan, notes the update of the performance management framework, and notes that separate reports will continue to be submitted to elected members on each of the council's priorities through 21-22. I
Agreed.
do apologise, but I'm
Agreed.
sorry, Brian. Would you come in and tell me what I missed, please?
Yeah, apologies, convener, for interrupting. In addition to the recommendations, I think you had asked for a report, a follow-up report on the indicators CCON 1.
Indeed so. I trust that will have your support. Thank you. That comes to the natural break in our meeting, and I would ask that we just pause for a few moments. If anybody wants to have a short break, then that would be the right time to have it, I think.
Sorry to interrupt again, convener. Just to say that that's the end of the item of business, which all members of the council are permitted to attend. So during the break, if members who are not members of the committee could take the opportunity to leave the meeting, they can, of course, watch the remainder of the meeting on live stream, but due to technology, the restrictions, you have to actually leave the meeting. So only members of the committee should come back after the 10-minute recess. Thank you.
That's fine. Sure. Sure. Thanks. Are we ready to start? Lorna, are you with us? No? No. Ah, well done. Good, okay. Right, welcome back to our meeting. We're now on the next item, which is item 6, corporate risks, the deep dive plan. Brian, could you take us on a deep dive, please?
Indeed, convener. In fact, I think the report itself is relatively straightforward and is essentially picking up on the expressed wishes of both the Audit Committee and the Executive for closer attention to be directed by members to the process of identifying, managing and mitigating risk, and indeed subjecting it to scrutiny. So essentially this report brings before you a series of proposed areas to be subject to deep dive, and indeed the first of these you will come to in the next item on the agenda with respect to the Council's handling of the coronavirus. And what this report contains is proposals for a subsequent sequence of deep dive areas that will come before you in due course. You can see in the consideration section of the paper 4.1 and 4.2 the classification with the more significant and obvious ones captured in para 4.1, and in 4.2 there is in effect a reserve list, areas that will be looked at, and will filter through those that are considered to merit attention by Scrutiny Committee. There's also an indicative timeline marked out in the appendix to the paper as well, where the list of the proposed deep dive areas are set out. So I think that's it in essence, convener. The recommendation invites you to agree the plan that's set out in Appendix 1. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Brian. I think we might welcome some sort of more detail around the plan, but as you say, it's set out for us, at least it's sketched out for us in page 44. Does anyone wish to come in on that to ask questions? Lorna?
A wee quick question, as a matter of fact. It's the first time today I heard about deep dive, but I do understand the co-op's delving deeper into all our policies and procedures and actions and things like that. However, on the assurance level, and we are aware just now the pandemic has brought up the deep inequality in society. I notice actually equality duties under the assurance, and get exclamation mark there. What does the green, yellow and the exclamation mark mean at this moment in time?
It's basically a traffic light classification. So green, fairly obviously, is a satisfactory position. The amber or yellow is somewhere where there is further work essentially to be done. And the exclamation mark indicates that further work's needed to get a proper handle on what the status is. So it's effectively work in progress. But all of these will be, in terms of the top part of the appendix, table 1, are all areas that will come before you in due course. So you will have the opportunity in doing your deep dive review to delve into the ins and outs and satisfy yourself that the arrangements are fit for purpose, and if not, indeed what needs to happen to change that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lorna, for your question. You anticipated the very thing that I was scratching my head over. Thank you. Does anyone else wish to come in? No. It looks as though at this stage, Brian, you've got off really quite lightly. Though I anticipate that the work has not started till we get into further into the timetable that is proposed. As I say, if I don't see anybody else wish me a comment, I simply say that the recommendations as per 2.1, which we agree that the 21-22 Deep Dive Plan as set out in Appendix 1 is to be proceeded with.
Agreed.
Thank you very much for that, Brian.
Great, yeah.
We'll go straight on to agenda item 7, and Kenneth Laurie. Kenneth, this is your report, and I'd be grateful if you could introduce it for us, please. Thank you.
Thank you, convener, and good morning, councillors. And this report is a direct response to the Scrutiny Committee's request for a holistic report on the Council's response to the COVID emergency. It brings together input from all of the Council services and also from the Health and Social Care Partnership and Falkirk Community Trust. And I'm very grateful, particularly to Douglas, who's kind of brought this report together, and Miranda Wilson, Emma Graham, both on the call today, for all of their work in terms of bringing this report to fruition. The report summarises the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on the Falkirk area, the work of the Council, working with partners and communities to mitigate these through its actions in terms of response and recovery. And in addition, the report sets out work undertaken to debrief on actions taken and the results of deep dive actions relating to resilience and water quality in operational buildings. I'm not proposing to go into the detail. There's a lot of information in this report, and I'll leave it for elected members to explore areas of particular interest and concern. But what I would say is that this does set out the impact both overall and in relation to specific service areas. It gives a real sense of the volume and the scale of the activity, the resilience and the business continuity work undertaken, the fact that structured debriefs have been carried out in each service area, and initial key lessons learned as a result of that. It sets out something of how the Council has changed in terms of its ways of working and response. And as I say, it deals with specific risk issues, as mentioned in Appendices 1 and 2. And it also, in Appendix 3, there's a number of case studies listed. And I think that these relate directly to our COVID response. And I think that collectively, these give a really strong sense of the challenge faced and the nature and the quality of the response, the energy, the commitment of Council employees, the response from partners and communities. And much of that is excellent, and much of that is commendable and positive. And I suppose the challenge for us now as a Council is to build on that in terms of the lessons learned, building on the good things that have been achieved to further transform and improve our services to support our businesses and communities in what will continue to be, I think, a very difficult and challenging period for some time to come. And that is inevitably a work in progress. So whilst we very much hope, as we see the rollout of vaccinations, we hope that we're coming towards the end of the pandemic. The impacts of this is something we're going to be dealing with for many years to come, inevitably. So, Convener, myself and my colleagues are happy to take any questions and talk about any aspect of the pandemic and the response which members would wish to talk about today. In terms of the recommendations that are in front of you, you're asked to note the report, to note the work undertaken to debrief on the Council's response, to identify lessons learned, and the deep dive reports undertaken and set out in Appendices 1 and 2. To consider if the report requires to be forwarded to the Executive for their consideration, along with any additional comments that this meeting might wish to put forward. To provide feedback on the report, to inform the lessons learned, and to agree that the Scrutiny Committee receives a follow-up on this work by the end of the year. And Convener, that really is a sense that whilst this is a broad and holistic report, there is still work progressing. There are still lessons to be learned, and we do think it would be useful to have a further discussion with the Scrutiny Committee at that point. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you for that. Thank you. David, questions? David?
Thanks, Convener.
First hand up.
Yeah, I may have other questions. I've just got one now. I just want to say initially, during the pandemic, the work by the staff, especially staff that have been doing different roles and jumping in to bail everybody out. We've got to mention a great debt of thanks to these staff. I'm thinking specifically, but not just of bereavement services staff and housing, like the support for people staff. They've done a fantastic job over the past while. I just wondered what kind of support the staff are actually getting, because they're the front line basically. They'll be under a lot of pressure. As I say, they've really stepped up to the plate here, and they've done a fantastic job. So what support have the staff been getting, and what support can they get, or are they still getting?
Convener, I'll come in if I may on that point. Firstly, I mean, to thank Councillor Balfour for his comments, and it's certainly true, and you can see this throughout all of the case studies, the extent and the degree to which staff have stepped up, particularly in the front line, to do what needed to be done in response to the needs of our communities. I think has been exceptional and has been very positive indeed for the council. And it has been really important that throughout the pandemic, we have endeavoured to support staff in their work, and there's various facets to that in terms of very practical support on mental health, because actually, as members will understand, the staff have struggled with the challenges that they've faced, the time and hours that they've put in, the issues that they've had to deal with. So throughout all of this, colleagues in HR and indeed colleagues across the council have endeavoured to provide that ongoing support, that understanding, that making available services that staff would find useful. And I still think there's a lot to do in that regard. We need to be there for our staff over the forthcoming period, because these challenges continue. So I think that's been a critical aspect of the pandemic. I think we've endeavoured to do what we can to support staff, and I think there's undoubtedly more that we do need to do in the future.
Thank you,
thanks for that. I may come back in with other questions. Thank you, Convener.
David Grant, and Alison next after David.
Thank you, Convener. Could I turn to, sorry, before I go, I'd like to echo the sentiments of Councillor Balfour and praise our staff and for their energy and their commitment in the response that we dealt with the pandemic. So I'd like to echo their sentiments. Could we turn to page 47, please? And it's back to our deep dive, section 3.4. This one says that the resilience of water quality. Can I ask one of the officers, is that to do with Legionnaires, and if so, who carried it out? Because I asked this question in the last council meeting about who's appointed to carry out this work, and it was a company from Ireland. So I would like to get an answer on 3.4, please, of page 47, who carried out the deep dive with water quality. And if I could also come in with another question for the time being is, Mr. Laurie has said that we've looked after our staff, etc. It says there's a lot of staff working from home, and if you turn to page 50, up at the top, we support our employees with the purchase of a desk and chair for the home to ensure safe workplace. Have we supported our staff who are working from home with any, with their electricity and heating, etc.? Have we contributed to anything in their lines? Could I get the two questions answered, please? Thank
Douglas, Douglas Duff, could you take that?
I'll come in on the points about the water quality. So there is a table in the appendix to the report that gives an update on the work on water quality. The deep dive exercise was undertaken by our corporate risk colleagues in collaboration with ourselves, so with our team who have responsibility for water quality and facilities team. And the appointment was to a company called HBE Limited, that's noted in the report. And they were appointed after consideration of suitable companies that could undertake this work. Obviously, at the time of the initial surveys, when they were required, there was a lot of pressure on the availability of companies with that specialist expertise to do that work. And given the COVID restrictions and so on, our options were quite limited. But subsequently, we have got that company now in post on a more continuous basis to offer that service, and they're working through that. As the report notes, that's been prioritised to those buildings that have had to be opened up in the immediate period, and there is a backlog that they're working through for the remaining properties as they do get opened up. CMT have active scrutiny of the process of building reopening so that all the necessary checks are in place. In relation to support for employees, yeah, I mean, for our own staff and development services, we're pointing them to the various forms of support, and there are tax and incentives, etc., for that. But I don't know whether Stuart might want to give more details on the specific question relating to power bills, etc.
Thanks, Douglas.
Stuart,
Just to echo the point you've made over the information that's been made available to employees over tax relief when you're working from home. So there's various employee bulletins that go out maybe in a monthly, 6-weekly basis, and covered off in a number of those bulletins. There's been a reminder the staff have been able to claim some tax relief when they're working from home.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, thank you. Alison, I think you were next. Alison Black.
Yeah, I'd agree with everybody else that's spoken already. The work that was done in the start of the pandemic was absolutely outstanding. The support for people service was set up really, really quickly. And I mean, the work that they did was just brilliant. And then the way we got the grants out so quickly, Paul Ferguson's team and economic development, I mean, that was an outstanding piece of work as well. And just the fact that the waste management team, the bin men, etc., worked, so hard. They were basically putting their life at risk in the first few weeks of the pandemic when we didn't know what we were dealing with. So I think our staff have got a lot to be proud of, and the community's got a lot to be grateful for in the way that they responded. But for me, just a few things I would like to say. Really, now that the pandemic, obviously, the virus is still there, but the vaccines programmes going on, and things are looking more optimistic. We need to manage expectations now, because people have got used to having free food and things like that, and community groups are used to being able to give these types of things to people, and so we need to make sure that going forward the money that we have available goes to those that really need it and know the wider community. I've spoken about this several times. The public toilets for people with a car, having public amenities doesn't mean very much to them, because they can go from A to B really quickly. But for people that struggled during the pandemic, they had to go on a bus to get their messages, and that bus was only every hour because the bus services were reduced. No having public amenities was a terrible thing for them, and we really need to look at how we provide those in the future, and try and be a bit more reactive to what actually people in communities actually need. Carers have had a terrible deal, not because of any way that things could have been done in any different way, but just because they've been left basically on their own with very little practical support. Maybe had a phone call or something like that, but very little practical support. And I think going forward, we need to think about how we can look after carers in the future, because they really have had a tough time of it. That was really all I wanted to say.
Somebody want to respond to that comment before you go?
Chair,
Kenneth, thank you.
I'll come in at that point. I mean, I think the issue about managing expectations is a really important one, and it is going to be difficult, because what we are going to see is, I think, continued very significant poverty and deprivation. Some of that existing in our communities already, of course, and some of it, greatly exacerbated by COVID. So we will need to stay very closely aligned to that agenda. And of course, when we brought forward the new corporate plan, we absolutely recognized that dealing with poverty was going to be at the center of things. So what we need to try and do is strike that balance between ensuring that those that really need our support, either directly or through our partners and community groups, retain that, whilst at the same time we, as the support coming in terms of grants and government support reduces, that we manage that really carefully, and I think that will remain a significant challenge. And the point about public toilets, when these were closed for an extended period of time, of course that related in large part to the restrictions, but I think the point made by Councillor Black about the importance of these facilities is understood, and in terms of our future provision and how we approach that is clearly something that needs to be factored in. But on the matter of carers, I mean, again, I suppose simply to agree with the point, I think it's been an enormously challenging period for them. I know that the Health and Social Care Partnership are very focused on that as an issue, and will be as they move forward and consider their own response and transformation on the back of COVID. Martin's on the call. I don't know if he wants to add anything to that, but again, to accept it's an important issue. They've had a very difficult time, and we need to be there to support them moving forward.
Martin, I think it would be useful if you could come in to join us, please, Martin, Tom, on the carer situation.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, one of the priorities for us now is engaging the carers to look at how can we start to engage and recover, I guess. So we are writing out to all the carers, from people who access day services, for example, talking about the new ways of working going forward. I think one of the real benefits, I have to say, from the independent review is that real focus again on carers, and it's something that we are really keen to build on the work that we've done to date. But I think Councillor Black was right, there is a lot of work to do. We have had to rely on carers to a much greater extent over the last 18 months or so than we have ever done before. And now, I think in the report that highlights, we've seen an increase in adult support and protection inquiries. Part of that is due to carer crisis and stress. So it is really critical that we respond to that as best we can. I mean, there are significant challenges, as I'm sure you'll appreciate, and as are highlighted in the report, but carers are a key priority for us. And we've started engaging with them as best we can. The IJB has recently agreed a new model for day services, which will actually look at inclusion and independence, and a big part of that is to support carers in a very different way and ensure that the people we provide services for are as integrated into communities as they can be. But it is a massive challenge for us, and I guess we wouldn't have survived if it hadn't been for the work of carers in responding to meeting care package needs, responding to the service demands, having shut down day services. All those kind of things were picked up by carers, so we couldn't really thank them enough. But now, as I said, the real challenge is how can we support them to continue in that role. But that work's ongoing, and it will be for some time. Thanks.
Thank you, Martin. It's a vitally important area for consideration. My previous existence before council was particularly targeted on caring, so I've got a particular interest there. Alison, have you got more questions to come in? If not, Jim Blackwood, you were trying to get in, Jim.
Yeah, thanks, Gavina. I know want to sound like a broken record, but I'd also like to congratulate the staff and the tremendous work I've done over the period, going above and beyond the call of duty.
Oh, yeah.
First class.
Yeah.
Question I've got is on page 50, and it's obviously about staff, and it's the supporting the staff with an allowance to support the purchase of a desk and chair for those working from home. Now, when a member of staff gets a job and come into the office, the desk and chairs there, they don't get an allowance to go and buy their own desk and chair. I can understand to a certain degree fitting in their house, but was it the allowance is all adequate? Or has people been out of pocket to purchase chairs and desks for their home to carry out council work?
Stuart, I think possibly that's
I'll
for you.
I'll pick that up, Convener. So an allowance of £100 was made available to employees to help buy some kit for the house. What I do know is a number of employees have gone back into the office to get their own chair or their own screens, or whatever. So I think what we've ended up with is a combination of equipment that employees have bought, and the council have contributed £100 towards that, but probably more a situation of kit that was in the office that employees have gone in and taken back home. So screens, arms for screens, their own chairs, whatever. So that, I think, is the kind of mix of what it is that's happened over the course of the pandemic to allow employees to work more comfortably at home.
So employers got £100 and then plus the opportunity to take stuff in their office, or they took stuff in their office and
you needed to provide receipts for anything that you bought, and that needed to be signed off by the line manager.
Okay, right. So everybody's comfortable with the situation, are they?
Well, I wouldn't go as far as saying everybody's comfortable with the situation, because whilst the council can provide the kit to help make things easier, employees have got different working environments in their home. Some have got the space to be able to have dedicated areas to work. Other employees won't have that space. So that's part of the reason why we're opening up some of our buildings to allow employees to go back and work in better environments for them than cramming themselves into somewhere in their home where they don't have the space or the conditions.
Okay, right. Another question is on page 62, the children's services, and my question is, what effect has the COVID had on the attainment gap, and how the children adapt to working from home? Has that caused a bigger, a larger attainment gap because of the situation of kids not being at school?
Through you, Chair, I think it's anticipated that for some young people, this has been a very, very challenging period. Obviously, the schools are now back, and schools are working to try and redress any losses that took place in learning. At the moment, there's not concrete evidence of any widening gap. As you know, we're just coming up to the exam period, and after the summer, we'll be able to have a look to see if there's been any change in the attainment gap. Suffice to say that the exam system this year is different from last year, which in turn was different from what was in place before. So such comparisons are likely to be difficult to make. Just on the point of the period where we were undertaking remote learning, I think in large measure the offer that we had was substantive. The uptake and the participation in remote learning was generally very good, but there were some young people for whom that was extraordinarily challenging. We've got some anecdotal evidence from children returning to school that some of them actually made better progress during the course of that period. Some young people who find school a challenging environment actually made quite considerable progress with their learning while doing it remotely. So, Councillor, I'm sorry I can't give you a more definitive answer, but just to say that for children and their families, as well as staff groups, through the course of much of last year and the early part of this year, it has been an extremely challenging period, but everybody's worked extraordinarily hard to maximise the learning offer and to make sure that the children and young people have been supported as best we can.
I assume that we will get to know the different, if there's what difference there is over the coming months.
That's correct. Yes.
Change. Okay, thank you.
Lorna?
Yeah. I also want to say I'm very thankful for the commitment and dedication for all the staff across all the services, and I'm mindful how the communities performed and they all came together during this pandemic. That is really inspirational. Is a matter of fact. I think that's very, very good. But what I would really like to say is I'm mindful of all the pressure that the staff's been under, as a matter of fact. I mean, to adapt to digital, and they've done that quite well, but any change in any organisation can cause some stress and anxiety. Also, they've had to deal with perhaps maybe their own children being off school, so it's been a different home environment, working from home. Like you said before, not everybody's got a big 4-bedroom house with a large garden to cope with and things like that. The change to services, how services stopped and restarted, and extra pressure and the expectations from the communities as well. And that in itself has, caused, I think, pressure and anxiety to many of the staff within Falkirk Council, and it's not been easy. I must admit, it is something that we should all be very proud of, that we've all done that. But what I'd like to find out is, has there been a consultation with all the staff to find out maybe what their anxieties, their concerns were? Actually, the reason for that is how we can learn lessons from that. Hopefully this pandemic will end and that'll be it. But we don't know that. Maybe in years to come we can learn real lessons from it and see how we could maybe work differently or work better, or you know, or what same as a matter of fact. So it's really, we have to engage with our employees, because Falkirk Council is the employees, you know, they're the ones that really are the nucleus of a community too, because they're the ones that operate the services, and they're the ones who, you know, help to design policy and that. So we must take their views into consideration. I think that's vital. So if we find out how it's really been for them during the pandemic.
Stuart, you pick that one up.
Yes, thank you, Convener, and everything that Councillor Binney says is absolutely correct. Just prior to Christmas, we undertook a pulse survey with our employees, just to pick up on the very points that Councillor Binney was talking about, and that kind of dipped into some of the issues that Councillor Blackwood was talking about in his question as well. And what we've got is the outcomes of that pulse survey, and we're now putting together an action plan working with a cross-section of employees within the council of how we respond to the issues that have been raised. And you know, the issues that have come out of the pulse survey, some of it relates to COVID, but some of it just relates to general issues of communication and lessons learned that we can of how we can improve our communication, whether we're in the middle of a pandemic or not. So pulse survey undertaken with our employees, action plan being developed with that cross section of employees, lots of lessons to be learned.
It's good to know, thank you.
Anyone else wish to ask a question? Perhaps I could ask Kenny Gillespie a couple of questions, please. On page 72 of the report, under housing and committees and communities, first of all, a small one, but I couldn't help but be rather puzzled to discover how tenant visits were being made by telephone. Could you explain it a little bit better, and how successful that actually has been?
Yeah. What we would normally do out with a pandemic is we would do annual visits, so that'd be face-to-face visits, and we have a series of questions that we ask. We continued these questions online. Now, this was used as a supportive measure in asking them their well-being and picking up on different information that we had of the individuals. We worked very closely with Paul Ferguson's team as well, and it was very much making sure that they were maximising their income. So if we had seen where some of our tenants were, shall we say, going into arrears where they had not been going into arrears before, was there an issue? Did they need additional support? Did they need additional support from our local, from our officers from different sections? Now, it wasn't just about council services, it was other support services as well that we could put them in touch with as well, tying that back to our CABs as well. And we spoke earlier about staff about mental wellbeing, but also our tenants with mental wellbeing issues as well. So we picked up on these things with our visits. So yes, it was very successful, and it just cemented the importance of having that one-to-one connection, whether it was by face-to-face or by telephone.
Yes, thank you for that. I also, actually, on that page under communities, it's the work with the communities is addressing poverty and inequalities. Could you just expand how, in actual fact, irregularities, sort of inequalities, I should say, how can they be recognised and responded to?
Again, Convener, no, absolutely. And if I could refer to the members to the report that went to executive of the 11th of May. It's fully explained in there a lot of the areas about equalities and the things that we found out in regards to things that were mentioned earlier from earlier with the corporate plan in regard to things regarding digital inclusion, food, sustainability going forward. But it's very much identifying these equalities and using our communities have helped to do that as well, but also cross work with different services and officers has helped us identify and been more of a one council approach. And that's certainly been some of the benefits and lessons learned. So these have been the areas where we've found equalities. These have been areas where we've tried to direct resources to minimise equalities. But it's very much been a council approach, councillor, to deal with that. And happy off record, councillor, to provide you with some specifics to where we've tried to do that as well.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else wish to make questions or comments to this? If not, we'll simply. Oh, sorry, Councillor Binney, if I ignored you again, I do apologise.
No, sorry, Councillor Patrick. Just can I come in here and maybe ask Mr. Ritchie if it's possible I can have a report back on the Pulse Action Plan outcomes when they're available, if you don't mind. I think that would be useful for councillors to read that and see the outcomes.
Happy to do that, Convener.
Thank you.
Good. Splendid. Thank you very much. Okay. Simply now go to the recommendations under 2.1. Recommendations, it notes the report under its response to COVID-19, notes the work undertaken to debrief the Council's responses. It's very helpful there, and specifically mentioning resilience and water quality in relation to the response. Considers if this report requires to be forwarded to the Executive for consideration, along with any additional comments that the scrutiny would like to have been made. I would presume that it is not purely in our hands that this be so remitted, but I would imagine that it would be the wish of members that the paper be passed to the Executive for consideration. And finally, provide the feedback in this report to inform the lessons learned, and agree that the Scrutiny Committee will receive a follow-up to this work by December. Trust that members. Sorry, Brian, you're telling me something I've forgotten.
Sorry, that was just to add that Councillor Binney had asked for a follow-up report on the outcomes from the Pulse Action Plan.
Yes, I would hope that, in fact, Councillor Binney would indeed receive the follow-up report. It would be something that I think we all wish to receive a copy of. Thank you.
Can I just ask, are you asking the committee to agree to refer this to the Executive?
Yes, yes, I am. I have the support of the committee that the report be now referred to the Executive. David Balfour, yes, David.
Thanks, Convener. Just one other thing. Is it possible we could ask for the staff to be sent our thanks from the committee?
That would certainly be more than appropriate. I perhaps is something that Brian could attend to in actual fact on our behalf.
Yeah,
it's certainly merited, and it's good of you to confirm this. We will see that's done. Thank you. Now we go on to agenda item 8. If you just give me a second to find it, please. Sorry, please forgive me. 98, yes, okay. 98, right. Thank you. Stuart, I'm not quite sure. Stuart, you pick them up. Thank you.
I think it's going to be Paul Ferguson, convener, that's going to talk members through this report.
Oh, yes, thank you.
I think actually this one's mine.
Sorry,
I think it's
I
think
think
it's
in
Alan
actual
Stewart.
fact,
Sorry, on the
it's
wrong
Alan.
report.
I
Apologies.
think we're a report ahead of Stuart. Are we behind that? It should be Alan Stewart and Alan. My apologies, of course.
No
If you
problem.
could fill that in, thank you.
Certainly can. Thank you, Convener. Good afternoon, councillors. The intention of this report is to provide a summary of the Account Commission's report on digital progress in local government produced earlier this year. Added to that, the report provides a brief overview of some of the work being undertaken within the Council to achieve our digital ambitions. Ambitions which are detailed in the Digital Falkirk Strategy reported to the Executive in September last year. The Commission's report is fairly lengthy, extending to 39 pages, so included in the committee report is a link to the Commission's report for members' consideration. At 4.1, the report summarises the Commission's 6 clear messages. These are progress and impact of COVID-19, becoming a digital council, citizens at heart, workforce and skills, data and technology, and finally national leadership and collaboration. Each of the clear messages provide detail on the findings of the audit work undertaken with summary recommendations on how to achieve them. The report then moves forward to explain how the audit work was undertaken, recognising how considerable a part digital has played in all our everyday lives, especially since the pandemic began. It recognises how challenging it has been for councils to continue service delivery during the pandemic, but acknowledges more work is required to ensure digital exclusion is tackled and skills are built on to access services. At 4.4, the report recognises the work undertaken with various partners, including the Digital Office, COSLA, and the Scottish Local Government Transformation Board, to name but a few, to produce Scotland's digital strategy. And again, the committee report includes a link in the report to the strategy for further reading. The national strategy has significant synergy with our own digital Falkirk strategy, which was produced last year. Moving on to section 5.1, the report details how the audit was undertaken with the support of 6 local authorities in Scotland, each of whom are at different stages of their digital journey. This helped the audit work to establish a flavour of not only the digital services being provided by councils, but the work being undertaken to establish the building blocks for digital transformation and how these have helped during the pandemic. At 5.2, the report explains in more detail each of the 6 characteristics of a digital council identified by the Commission, together with more detailed explanation of their findings. In this section, the report also highlights some of the work being undertaken by the Council in relation to each of the identified characteristics. This is not meant to be an exhaustive list, but simply a flavour of the work being undertaken. The first key characteristics identified is digital leadership, and this relates to how clear Council's digital vision and ambitions are and how transformative they are. This includes outcomes to improve our citizens' lives, engagement, leadership, investment, members' engagement and governance. Each of the characteristics is then followed in the report by reflections on how these are being achieved within our own council. Moving on to the second characteristic, user-focused, the report considers engagement in the use of service design and improving outcomes for citizens and others. Again, the update on our own approach is provided, explaining the approach the Council's taken and how service designers are working on automating processes to provide users with 24/7 access to services. The next characteristic moves on to relate to digital workforce and focuses on ensuring appropriateness of skills to not only deliver but to develop new ways of working. The audit identifies areas where more work should be undertaken across Council, and this is balanced with an update on the work being undertaken across Falkirk Council to achieve this. The fourth element relates to collaboration, identifying the various stakeholders and their contributions to delivering a digitally focused Scotland and how collaboration both has and should take place. The update, which then follows, details some of the work being undertaken locally, including the use of technology to collaborate with citizens and partners alike. Technology and data enabled is the next characteristic. The report talks about legacy systems, making better use of data and the introduction of common platforms across councils to share data securely and inform decision making for better outcomes. As with each of the characteristics, the report then identifies some of the improvements necessary for councils to work on to improve their contributions. Finally, the sixth characteristic relates to innovation and how councils should adopt a culture of openness, looking outward to explore how services can be delivered differently. The report notes the work being undertaken by the council in relation to the digital Falkirk strategy, and as previously mentioned, records an update to committee will be provided after the recess. In section 6, the report acknowledges the funding provided to date to progress many of the council's digital ambitions and some of the significant and good work being undertaken to achieve a positive outcome. In conclusion, the report provides a comprehensive position of the positive work being undertaken across councils and highlights opportunities for collaboration and improvement to further the work, acknowledging the significant synergy with the work being undertaken locally to achieve the digital Falkirk strategy. A very short overview of the report submitted for members' considerations, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for that, Alan. Before I throw it open for questions, could I ask under 5.2, it especially mentions involvement of elected members is not well developed. This hasn't been kind of picked up under the Falkirk update, and I'd be interested to know whether in actual fact this applies, you know, in your view to Falkirk, and how you would respond to that.
Thanks, Convener. Yes, certainly it's reflective of some of the councils that the audit report looked at, but you'll see in the Falkirk update that I provided on page 102, it talks about the work that we do with members in relation to obviously the council, the future updates, and indeed updates to members on the various projects that continue to be provided. That's both through the Make It Happen board and in reports that come to committee on the digital progress. Indeed, we're hearing some of those updates today.
Thank you very much. Questions, Councillor Blackwood, Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Convener. On page 103, the digital workforce, Alan, insufficient staff capacity and digital skills are the most significant barriers in progress. Won't these barriers be people working from home?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, some of it may very well be people working from home, but as you'll be aware, we've invested heavily in providing technology to people working from home with the provision of laptops and various other pieces of equipment that Stuart referred to earlier on. I think this part of the report from the Commission relates mainly to how people are able to use the technology that's been provided. And indeed, you'll know yourself, we provided Office 365 to everybody, and that was a steep learning curve for everybody in relation to that. But we've very much embraced that and provided online training using some of the improvement team and indeed the ICT team to help get people up to speed with the technology. We also have a very comprehensive online training section that's provided by Microsoft on some of the technology that we use within the council. And indeed, as Kenny alluded to earlier on, with the work that we're doing with communities as well, there's work ongoing to ensure that communities aren't left behind with this technology too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Some of us are still learning in 365.
I think we'll be learning that for a while.
Yeah. Councillor Binney, Councillor Balfour next.
Thank you, Councillor Patrick. Just on the back of involvement elected members and things like that, I know you sort of explained that, I must admit. But earlier in the report, you said that you were thinking about increasing using social media channels to improve its public performance, etc. However, you probably are aware that many councillors use a lot of their time at home promoting council business and actively engage with residents, raise awareness of council policy initiatives and take inquiries. I know I'm on Facebook quite a lot. A lot of the residents come to me on Facebook. But to me, that's a simple way of communication. That is kind of what people's using. So the point I'm making as well, I've noticed the Falkirk Council page, like on Facebook, as a matter of fact, it does have a telephone icon on it, but it doesn't have a message icon on it. And what I do understand from outside business organisations, sometimes they have a chat. And Falkirk Council, and for me, what I say, that is a media route that does activation. It's simple for people to use. I mean, I've actually spoken to people and they think, right, that an email's far too long to write to the council. Whereas Facebook, for a lot of people, not everybody, it's easier. So is that something Falkirk Council might develop in future to open up on Facebook, the Falkirk Council page? Because communication is a two-way thing. It's not a one-way route. And we want to actively promote engagement, dialogue and conversation for various things. So is that something you might be thinking about in the future if you are talking about opening up social media channels?
Thanks, Councillor. It's certainly we have quite a heavy social media presence now with Facebook and with Twitter. One of the things that we are looking at as part of the ongoing digital work that we're doing is in relation to chatbots, which is a technology that allows citizens to interact with the council and be directed to the right place in the council, and indeed to receive answers to questions that they may have. I think there's a concern about opening up Facebook to people to make specific comments in relation to Facebook and Twitter, because it opens up the opportunity for people to make quite negative and quite sometimes quite derogatory comments, not only about the council but about other people as well. So so what we do try to do is we do try to manage the messages that are being identified on the Facebook page, but we do have a person who specifically looks after Facebook and Twitter and provides comments back. And you'll see on Facebook and Twitter when a question is asked, the person that looks after that does try to provide the information back. And if there's any questions that come up that are more detailed and more specific, that require a more detailed answer, then that person takes a note of that and passes it to the correct section for to respond back to the customer, where indeed we can identify the customer who's asked the questions.
Sorry, the Facebook page, I just see a telephone number. I don't see a message there, so that somebody can go in that and message Falkirk Council. I mean, other organisations like Scottish Power, Scottish Gas have messages. And when you put a message into them, maybe about some business and inquiry, it does come back to you on your Facebook. So lots of organisations that are doing that, and that's quite quick, because what you're finding just now, a lot of people aren't able to get through to that particular specific person on the phone or that department on the phone. So I'm just saying, for some people, it might be a quicker way of engagement dealing with their inquiry sort of going forward.
Okay, I'm unaware of the kind of message part on that particular part, Councillor Binney. As I said, people can make comments back, but I'm unaware of the message part, and I'll check that out and I'll come back to you separately on that, if that's okay.
That's lovely, thank you.
Councillor David. Councillor.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, just Office 365 seems to be quite laggy, I think is the word. It's very slow at times. What plans are in place to improve the performance? I know specifically on my phone, it's at times trying to get an email, I've got to sit and wait for 5 or 10 minutes before the email appears, although it's actually come up with a notification saying there's an email there. It could be an important one for a constituent, and I've got to wait on it coming in. Other times, even just trying to open a document or something like that, it can take ages. So what can we do to try and improve the performance of 365 and other applications?
Thanks, Councillor Balfour. I must admit that's not my experience of Office 365. I find Office 365 really quick, and in actual fact on my phone it seems to come through quicker than it does on the desktop at times. So I think what I'll do is I'll ask ICT to contact you in relation to the issues that you're having, Councillor Balfour, and we can maybe take that offline and see if there's a solution for you in relation to that. Because as I said, I'm not aware of that being a challenge that we're experiencing. There's certainly nothing coming through our service desk to say that that's an issue. So I'll ask Ian at ICT to contact you in relation to that.
Right, thanks for that.
Yes, David Grant, please.
Thank you, Convener. Alan, could you ask Ian to phone me as well, because that what Councillor Balfour explained is exactly what happens to me. It comes up on the screen, I've got an email, I try and open it, then I've got to sit and wait until it comes. Exactly how Councillor Balfour explained it is the exact same as mine. It's the phone.
I think I see Alison waving, so perhaps you get the same problems. In fact, there's so many people waving at me. We've maybe got a more intensive problem than
It may be the phones, possibly.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just wondering if it's a problem with the. I'm assuming that it's all on the phones that all the councillors are referring to. Okay, but it's not a problem on your laptops. Is that correct?
No, that's right. Yeah.
Okay,
right.
I think we'll have a look at the telephones then, because it may very well be something to do with the signal that's coming through the phones. So I'll ask Ian to have a look at the phones for you. I'll ask him to look in general at the phones, but I'll come back to the three councillors who have mentioned it in particular.
I think that would be
Balfour,
appreciated.
Grant and Black. Certainly will. That's not a problem.
Does anyone else wish to come in with any questions or comments under this heading? If not, we go to under recommendations under 2.1. Committee is asked to note the details of the Accounts Commission report, to note the brief update supporting the Council's approach to the key characteristics, and note that a more comprehensive report on progress with the Council's digital strategy will be submitted to members after the recess, so we can look forward to further updates at that time. Thank you very much. Turning now to our final item, recoverable debts. Brian, but also perhaps hope that. Well, Brian, will you be able to take that, or
Convener Paul, this is all Paul's work, so
oh
Paul's
yes,
best
thank
place
you.
to
Sorry,
present
I don't
it.
want to take away any of that. Yes, Paul. Sorry, could you take the report, please? Thank you.
No, yes, thank you, Convener, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm conscious this paper is the last thing before lunchtime, so I'll try and keep this as brief as possible. The background to this paper is that at the executive meeting in March, members considered the annual irrecoverable debts, and they agreed this matter should be referred to the Scrutiny Committee, and that's what this paper is now doing. In March, we wrote over £2.2 million of debt has been irrecoverable, which is around about 1% of the total amount we collected last year. It was unfortunate due to timing we couldn't get this report to April scrutiny, but it's obviously now coming to the June hearing. The report I've prepared sets out the key principles we apply in the recovery of all debts. It references the framework we set out in our corporate debt recovery policy, which was approved in 2017, and looks to provide some context to the activity and the challenges within each debt stream. There are 6 debt streams listed. These are council tax, housing rent, housing benefit overpayments, non-domestic rates, sundry accounts and temporary accommodation, and all have their own idiosyncrasies and own processes attached to those recoveries. One thing I do want to highlight is that section 3.4 references the fact that members, in being asked to approve the write-off of debts over £5,000 each year, generally receive reports which are predominantly related to non-domestic rates. This gives a slightly false impression of the situation. So, for example, last year in 2021, the rates accounted for 24% of the total debt written off, but it was 71% of the debt that members had to write off because of the £5,000 threshold. So that may have given a skewed impression of the debt being written off. All debts that are written off, which are not prescribed, will be pursued later on if the situation changes. So if a debt becomes recoverable, we will start to recover it again, and we do that routinely. The corporate debt policy is included within the paper, but hopefully the salient points have been captured within the report. So I hope the report makes it clear how dedicated teams across the council work to minimise the irrecoverable debt position, and explain it's a truly last resort to write off any debt. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Could I ask initially one question that start with reference to 3.4? Why, in actual fact, have we got a £5,000 threshold? Why £5,000? You know.
I mean, obviously that threshold has been in place now for the best part of 20 years, and it's to give members a bit more of visibility of some of the key debts that have been written off. I know that neighbouring authorities have a £10,000 threshold. For some context, for council tax, the number of lines I write off for council tax is about 900 different individual accounts with some fairly small balances. So I think that the threshold was set at a level that allowed members to have a suitable level of scrutiny over the key accounts that were written off. I think that maybe a time when that threshold may be increased, but I think £5,000 was determined probably back in the late 90s as being a suitable sum for members to see. I'm happy to revisit that, but I would explain that obviously the problem is the more debts you look at, the harder it would be for members to actually manage that, because I think currently I probably present about 100 records at the most each year to members, but in total I'm writing off around about 3,500 different individual transactions. So members are seeing a very small percentage, but seeing the key debts.
Yes, well, thank you for that. Any question? Alison Black? Oh, and next Jim Blackwood.
Yeah, it was just to ask
oh, no.
with regards to non-domestic rates. I mean, obviously you've got to watch what you're saying here because it's been recorded, but when the paper comes to members every year and we see, they see who's on the paper, quite often there's the recurring names, and I wondered if going forward, if there wasn't some way that economic development could work with finance to make sure that maybe sometimes those non-recurring names didn't need to keep coming up, because it's the same people keep getting leases in different properties and then no paying the rates.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's for individuals, but certainly there are individuals behind companies that are quite often on the report, and that's something that the Scottish Government are trying to deal with through the avoidance legislation and bringing in piece by piece. The reality is that rates liability is based on a set of principles, so you're liable if you've got the predominant occupation of that premises. So if you have the lease, whether it be through a council property or most of the private sector, you're liable. The problem is if the person who's liable has no assets or limited assets, we've got a very limited ability to recover that debt, because insolvency isn't really of any benefit to us. But I think that, yeah, we do work closely with economic development. We collect the rent on behalf of them as well. So I think that most of our tenants are fairly well managed. It is most of the private sector group where a landlord lets to a less scrupulous tenant, and that tenant has no intention to pay rates, and we've got to find ways to force them to do so. And hopefully those new powers as they come along will all help us to do that.
Yeah, okay. Next, was it, yes, Jim, Councillor Blackwood.
Yeah. Well, just similar lines to Alison, but in council tax and rent. You see, we're given an annual report, the same people who accrue debt over years. It's no last year's council tax was written off. You see a pattern develop there, and the impression Joe public's got to get is, that's been done about this. Why am I paying my council tax? Or why am I paying my rent? I know that that's not fact, but we see on an annual basis or at the end of the year, recoverable debts written off, and it's some person, and it's taken a number of years to get to that stage before we write it off. It creates the impression nothing's been done.
Yeah, Councillor Blackwood, I can understand that impression. I think that's part of this paper, is to maybe allay that. If somebody has an ongoing liability for council tax, we will not write off the debt at all, because they have both a historical and an ongoing charge. So what happens, the member sees when that debt crystallises, and that crystallises for two reasons. One is it now becomes a former debt where they've now left that property, and we've identified we can't possibly recover that historical debt, or they become bankrupt and the debt becomes prescribed. So I think what members see is that where we have been unsuccessful, I agree with that, That's not through lack of trying. So it's a case where the person has not got a state benefit we can attach, they don't have any wages that we can attach, they don't have any savings over £500 as a bank account we can attach, and they don't have assets where a bankruptcy would pay a dividend to us. So what we're left with, and you're right, is there are some people within the community where our powers are limited once we exhaust all those options. But those are very few, and I go back to the figure, we write off less than 1% of council tax debt. So what members see gives that impression, but just to explain the reason for the historical context is that we will not write off any debt when somebody's a current liable taxpayer until they're made bankrupt or they leave that property, and at which point we review the situation. But we don't write it, and that's why it looks like there's a lot of debt built up over years, because we don't write it off every year. We wait until it's crystallised and we have absolutely no chance of recovery before we write it off.
That explanation, Paul. Thank you.
Lorna?
Yeah, hello, Paul. I wanted to ask you a bit about overpayments, and in my last life, that was my job, actually, was fraudulent overpayments, having to calculate them and things like that. I noticed here you've got overpayments, though there's not any stats attached to that. How many overpayments do you have each year within housing and council tax, etc.? And really, the question within that, I noticed that fraudulent overpayments being recovered at a higher rate. Is that a quicker rate, or is there a penalty onto that overpayment, so they have to pay more back? Could you explain that, please?
So I'll try and explain both those parts, Councillor Binney. So the first thing is that the level of overpayments we're currently raising are only for housing benefit. Now, council tax benefit was abolished in 2015, so any what was previously council tax benefits, now council tax reduction, that's just added onto their bill, so that gets captured alongside council tax. And if it wasn't recovered, it'd be written off as council tax debt. The housing benefit, because of universal credit, there's less and less people get housing benefit, so therefore the number of overpayments is diminishing over time. I think I put in the report that last year we collected over 100% of the amount that we raised, but that was because we were collecting historical housing benefit overpayments and we were raising less in the current period of time. So, but with regards to the fraud issue, we have a statutory fixed deduction that we take from somebody's ongoing benefit. So if somebody's still getting housing benefit, we can take a deduction from that and basically add it to the rent debt. So for a fraud overpayment, the amount that we collect from that is a higher rate. I think it's £19 per week rather than £11 odds per week that we can take straight from their ongoing benefit. So that's only where it's an automatic. It only applies for the ongoing housing benefit. It does not apply to somebody who's making voluntary payments or through the sheriff officer or through a wage arrestment. It's only for people with ongoing housing benefit. And again, those cases in working age population are fewer and far between nowadays because of the move to universal credit.
And is that £19, is that a percentage of their income then? It can't go any more than that or any less than that. It's calculated somehow so that they have enough money to live on.
It's a figure that's a fixed amount that's not based on the individual's income. It's a fixed amount, but that's originally based on the minimum income for a 25-year-old on a means tested benefit. So it's around about 20% of the sort of income a 25-year-old would have through state benefits effectively. So it is, that's where it's sort of set in that context, but basically somebody could have £300 a week of benefits and get £19 off. Somebody could have £80 of benefits and get £19 off. So it doesn't really quite equate to the individual, but it's a fixed amount that's set every year by DWP that applies across the board no matter their income. It's only if they're on housing benefit. That's the only test.
Thanks, that's clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone that I've missed for questions? Yes, Jim Black, Councillor Blackwood.
Sorry, could I have a quick question again, just on the universal credit. Is that having an effect on rent arrears? Because now, before rent was paid in advance of the money they're given, now they're given all the money and have to pay the rent. Is that not creating a major problem with rent arrears?
It creates a challenge, and indeed, I mean, there are probably 4 different components here, and I'll touch on them very quickly if I can. At the start of somebody moving on to universal credit, there's a lag because they have to apply, there's a delay in getting universal credit, and there's a delay in that money getting paid to us. Where they've pre-existing arrears, or where they volunteer to do it, we get the money direct from the DWP, but again, there's still a lag in that one. So every single new case is a lag. people who are on and off universal credit, who dip in and out, that lag is repeated time and time again, so actually it compounds itself over time. However, the upside, and there's an upside here, is people who are on universal credit long term, we can get the payments direct from the benefit every month, and we also can get a deduction if arrears apply. So actually, for the stable cases on universal credit is quite a good way of bringing people out of poverty and out of rent arrears. But where it doesn't work as well is when people are in and out of work routinely, and therefore the sort of situation is repeated time and time again with this lag and this delay and this problem for them. So I think that there are pros and cons to universal credit. The short sum of though is that, and the main point, it's a lot more work for my team within the corporate debt team, and it's a lot more work for Kenny Gillespie's teams in housing, because that takes a lot more one-to-one management with individual tenants. Before it was fairly automatic, the money went into the rent account and that was it. Now there's a lot more manual work for the teams involved in rent recovery.
Thank you for that. Yep.
Right. Thank you very much. I can only thank the officers for their support and information and assistance during the meeting today. Turn to recommendations. Straightforward, we note the existing arrangements in place to recover debt and minimise irrecoverable debts. With that, I bring the meeting to a close. Thank you all. And I'm sure if we're getting towards the furlough time in the council, not a paid furlough on this occasion, but simply the usual gap. I wish you all well and I hope that you have a pleasant summer ahead. Thank you very much.